with titles like Heiligenstadt and, it's the next one, which is so emotive, Thus We Shall Live Perhaps Forever. I find that really moving every time I have to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is a really naive question, but the music came first of all. But did you think of the titles in any ways in relation to when you were putting, the etude?
Well, these etudes are also, many of them, songs.
Okay.
So the Heiligenstadt is a song, and which I will record at some stage. And Heiligenstadt, of course, is the letter that referred to as that Beethoven wrote to his brothers when he was contemplating suicide. And so that is what this first etude is called Heiligenstadt refers to. And then a lot of the etudes, in a way, they're like biographical diary entries in Beethoven's diary. A lot of them have to do with Beethoven. And some of them, like there's one hilariously cynical one, number 10, called Never Outwardly Show. And that's a diary entry that Beethoven made where he said, never outwardly show people the contempt they deserve, because one cannot know when one may need them. It's wonderful. And
treat the abuse of odious men as praise.
Yes, yeah. And the second one, Thus We Shall Live Perhaps Forever, is a letter that Beethoven wrote to a painter, I think an Italian painter, where he said they had been drinking that before, and Beethoven really couldn't remember half of what they said, but he ends that he says to the painter, continue to paint, and I shall continue to write down more notes, and thus we shall live perhaps forever.
Beautiful. Just can I ask you a question? A violinistic question, come back to Heiligenstadt for a second. I know the word etudes is a kind of nearly controversial
these are
word.
not normal etudes,
I know.
Really. They're more like etudes in tenderness and tenacity. They're not easy, as you know. Some of them are easier than others, but they're not standard technical etudes. Some of them occasionally are, but there's a lot of double stopping, all that stuff. They're more like very intimate diary entries.
Yeah, and every one of them are character pieces for me. And that was one of the things that I realized.
Like, for instance,
quickly.
this one, number 11, Don't Visit Me Anymore. I'm not giving a concert. That's a weekend where Beethoven was absolutely furious because he felt he'd been had money-wise, that he wasn't being paid enough for a concert he was being asked to do, and he refused to do the concert. And he fired off letters to about 5 different people on the same day, saying, don't visit me anymore, I'm not giving a concert. So that's an incredibly angry one. Here, this one, number 13, Beethoven would often write down on the back of manuscripts or in his diary reminders to himself, and this is after a visit to his doctor. Take the pills, it says. It more or less says, take the pills on Saturday, on Friday the powders rub my chest. It actually ends with the line.
That's one of my favorites. That's the one that you could keep going round and round and play
my chest,
forever.
Yeah. And this one, number 14, he says things like, he says to people, art can be of help to you in daily life. And number 17, that's actually from my opera Salome.
Yeah.
It's whatever you want, and actually whatever you want refers to Herod saying to Salome, ask me anything and I'll give it to you, whatever you want. But it's from Salome. Number 18, We Walked Along. That's a very strange account that Beethoven wrote of a walk he took with his nephew. What he writes is so messed up psychologically. He describes how he felt the need to write it down, that he took a walk with his nephew, who was just a boy, and he says something like that the boy pressed his hand, but he did not press his. And then he ends by saying, he needs my love, I do not need his. It's bizarre. It's so strange. And number 20, maintain a steady attitude. That's quite amusing. I can't remember where that. And there's another diary entry. Beethoven suddenly decides to write, decides to note that light green rooms are the best for one's eyes. And then the following one, it's called What Do Blankets Cost? Beethoven knew this woman in Vienna who was a confidante, who advised him on domestic matters. Beethoven was obsessed with the price of things. And he was paranoid about being robbed by his servants, who would tell him something costs this when it did cost less. So he wrote to this woman, Nancy, I can't remember her name. Her husband was a famous Viennese piano builder. He says, what do blankets cost? He needs to know what they cost, so that when his servants tell him, that he'll know if they're lying or not. And then there's one, 24, where you play the violin and hum along as best you can.
I'm trying.
Beethoven humming along. Yeah. And then he decides, like at number 25, he says, he makes a note in his diary as if to remind himself. He's trying to figure out what his life is going to be in the future. And he says, for living and working a house in the suburbs. He thought the suburbs were...
Yeah, I'm always thinking when I'm practicing that in Zone 3 of North London that I'm in the suburbs practicing Barry Beethoven.
And the last one then is called Archduke Rudolph, referring to his patron. And that's a song as well. A lot of these are songs. Anyway, it's a letter to Archduke Rudolph. And, they were very close, Rudolph and Beethoven. And they were both very proud of the connection. Archduke Rudolph, even though he was, the Archduke, he was very proud of his friendship with Beethoven. Beethoven taught him piano. And Rudolph also wrote music. And so they had a very close connection. It was quite emotional, I think.